All right. Welcome back to Trainwreck Games. It's been a little while. And in true to the name of this channel, I was on a little bit of a roll with this game. It was starting to really go pretty smoothly. I wasn't looking up rules constantly. I cut out a lot of the dead time. So the first couple of sessions, I can tell you, I was constantly, like when I was going through the entire turn, I was constantly stopping and uh, looking up rules. By the time I was doing just the recaps, I was able to get through turns relatively quickly, and it gave me some hope that I'd be able to bang out. I think I got to turn 4, so basically halfway through the game, and I was hoping with the momentum I'd been picking up, with the familiarity I was gaining with the rules, that I would be able to finish this one out in a week. But I don't know if this happens to everybody. This has been sort of the plague of my gaming for the last, I can't even remember how long. It's been years. And it's just a combination of life getting in the way. I was on a roll with this, and then I got hit with pretty involved work project. While the pretty involved work project was wrapping up, still pretty involved. It sort of was involved right to the end of the project. Some family stuff happened. The family stuff became involved. And even though in some weird ways that should have given me more time, what it actually did was it left me exhausted. And uh, while I had some more free time, I found I had less energy. So I found myself, doing easier things, playing video games, doing role playing games online with some guildies, some friends, things like that, instead of sort of taking the time to focus on my solo wargaming. So that's what's been happening. And the next thing you know, it's been like 5 months. I think the last post was at the beginning of March. So for that, for what little it's worth, I apologize. But I think what I'm going to do here, because I've sort of been thinking about, as things have been slowing down and I realized maybe I'm getting some time back, what am I going to do with Battle for Stalingrad? And I think, maybe to the disappointment of 3 people out there, I think I'm going to wrap it up, even though I've only gotten to the halfway point. The truth of the matter is that I don't really have that familiarity with the rules. That momentum that I had going is gone. Which is not anything against the game, actually. The game I thought was really starting to click and I was starting to enjoy it. But I think now what makes the most sense for me is, you start, again, maybe this is, you know, relatable to other war gamers. You start to get that itch, that sort of, you start seeing stuff on your shelf. You start realizing, like, oh, I do remember how to play that. Oh, or I just did that on Vassal and it was really fun. And I could just jump right in and, wouldn't, take as much, not that this game is a chore or that hard to play once you get going with it, but I just started to think, okay, I need to, I think, say for the time being that I've had my shot with this one, and I'm not, I do like purge games sometimes, like a lot of us probably. Uh, this is one I think I would hold on to because I think there's gonna come a day, and I don't know when, but like I might think to myself, like, you know what, I've got a week, maybe I have a week off, or maybe, the family's out of town for some reason. And I'm just gonna, reread the rules, get it going. One thing I haven't had to do in a while, given how, sporadic I play games, which is I think part of the reason I mentioned part of the reason why I wanted to do this was to get gaming into a more consistent part of, my day-to-day hobbies and routines. It's been a long time since I've had to put away a real war game. So I've got to figure out what's the best way. I might spend tonight just, setting up the reinforcement display, taking a look at the initial, forces chart, and maybe actually putting it away properly. Because when I set this up the first time, I had stored it entirely wrong, and it took a while. It was a bit of a chore for me to set up because I, sort of started off in a bad place by not getting it organized in a logical way for actually playing the game. So, that'll be interesting. Again, like I haven't had to do in a while. So, it's not that it's fun, but it just makes me feel like I'm at least doing something. And then I'll figure out what the next game will be. Been on a, again, like not that I've been actually playing a lot, but I've been doing a lot of mulling about and thinking about ATS, the Advanced Tobruk system. There's all sorts of games. Sometimes I'm, like I know, like this is a war game. Not all the games I play are war games. Most of them, that I own are. But sometimes I'm like, I think Gloomhaven would be fun, but I don't know what I would do with that on this channel. I mean, that'd be boring and full of spoilers. That's not really interesting. I'm really curious about the is it Gale Force 9? I'm not sure who makes it. The Firefly, the game. I started playing that with my family, and I was having a blast. Not everybody else was, though, so we ended up putting it away. But I was like, oh, I know this is a solo friendly game. I don't know. Anyway, who knows? I have a potential OCS game coming up in the fall. It might be good to get a little bit of that under my belt, so I'm not completely green going in. I guess depending on how, you know, COVID and the Delta wave and all that stuff goes, I guess we'll determine, what I can do in the fall. But at least at the moment, the plan is to potentially have a sort of face-to-face game of DAC 2. So anyway, and then sometimes I look at games like that I've played in the past and I actually made some progress in. One of the last ones I really put a dent in was, Axis Empire's Total Krieg. I had a blast with that. I got from 1937 until 1940, 1941, and then, man, this was years ago. Then we had, it might have been Superstorm Sandy. Something hit that made everybody say, like, you better clear your basements. We're going to have a really bad storm. And even places that don't normally flood might flood. And I didn't want my game collection, which I store in my super creepy basement, to get affected. So I moved everything upstairs, and I think I had to put it away for that. Again, but I think I had hit a rut like did here where I had to stop for a while anyway. So it wasn't like I was blowing through it. But there's games I look and I was like, oh yeah, that was a lot of fun. And I should actually do it this time. None of that matters too much. But anyway, so before I'll end with, like, I guess my half-baked final thoughts. But before I do that, I do want to say that I have one last mistakes were made. I remember, so with turn 4, I had done the artillery and the air points. You can see up here the air points are kind of gone. I blew through the artillery, and while I was doing so, I finally found the rule that said German air points cannot hit Trans-Volga artillery. I'd been doing that wrong the whole game. I'd like to think that I was wasting air points on Trans-Volga artillery that I could have been using over here, so maybe there was some slight balancing effect. Probably not. It was a pretty big mess up. I should have been having more Trans-Volga artillery support probably here, where the Germans, took some key positions. But, honestly, who knows how it would have affected the game. So beyond that, I mean, I'm sure there's a million other mistakes were made. That's one I remember from, like, again, 5 months ago when I last played this game. So with my completely half-informed, half-baked final thoughts on this game, or as the internet likes to call it, total expertise. Here's what I think. I think this is a really fun game. I'd be curious if this were played face-to-face and you asked the German and the Russian player at the end of the game who had more fun, how that would play out. The part of the game I got through is the first half, and like a classic Eastern Front game, there's the ebb and the flow, so the Germans often in a lot of games. What's interesting about this is even at this scale, the Germans often get sort of the quote unquote fun part at the beginning of a game, which is, rolling through the map, beating up at will. And then it sort of shifts obviously to the Russians, and that's how it balances out. You can see on the map that the Russians have a lot more units than the Germans. And while the Germans have a couple of rounds of reinforcements, it's not that the Germans aren't getting any. So I'd be curious if this was now the Russians' time to start that push back and if things would have gotten more interesting for the Russians. Because what was happening a lot for me was it was sort of, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but, the Germans are on the attack, the Russians are on defense. And, looking at the chart, you have to sort of really maximize your Russian defenses. Obviously, I mean, that's just, even if it weren't abstracted, that's what you would want to do anyway. But because it's not sort of real, because it's abstracted, what I felt like I was doing a lot of the time, and this sort of reinforces in my head the idea that this is like an old school design, is I was sort of playing the numbers, right? So I'm like, okay, I know in a fortified structure, the Soviets get this, they get that, they get that. And so I was constantly trying to like maximize defenses, but I was sort of playing the numbers and playing the map that way. And it didn't always feel like, I don't know how to really say this. It didn't always feel like I was, just sort of looking at the map and making decisions. You know, man, I'm not quite sure how to put this. Like I said, I felt like I was playing the numbers more than I was like looking at the map, looking at the scenario, sort of internalizing, okay, we've got these units here, those units there. I felt like it's like, okay, if I can triple my defense here and I can turn this 2 into a 7 or 6 and, so on and so forth. I felt like I was sort of, jigging numbers instead of sort of making broader tactical or strategic decisions. I don't know if that makes any sense. But that's sort of how it felt when I was playing the Russians. With the Germans, I felt like, again, because you're just sort of rolling through the map, like, oh, let's take this group, let's smash through there, let's punch a hole here, which is what I wish I felt like I was doing with the Russians, like shore up this hole here, prevent this from a collapse, this and that, instead of just like hold this star, make sure it's triple power, give up that star because it's not a fortified triple power, that kind of thing. I don't know what game would actually, these are games and games use the math, so I'm not sure how that would actually be avoidable, but in some ways, that's what I sometimes felt like I was doing. Uh, Having said that, the game, when I was playing it consistently, there was a couple weeks there where I was playing and filming very consistently, almost every day. And when I wasn't filming or playing consistently, I was editing. So I was doing something all the time with this game. And during that time, this game really started to click, which is sort of what's disappointing, that it started to really click right before I had to put it on pause. And maybe there's some Freudian psychological roadblock that I put there, like, scared of commitment, sitcom plot stories. But that's sort of what happened. And then, yeah, like I said, work got crazy, then family got crazy. So I feel like this is a game that, I mean, everybody purges, but I'm going to hold on to this one. I'm going to see about putting it away in a more logical uh, sense that makes it easier to pull this one back out someday when I have time. And I'm like, yeah, I'm feeling like a Stalingrad game. I really like this game. I feel like this is a great sort of compromise. I could not do was it Streets of Stalingrad? I could not do that one. I owned it. I looked at it. I just could not do it. Um, there was a part of me that really wanted to be able to do it, and I just started reading the rules. And I was like, no, it's not even that it was. Well, I mean, it was involved, but I was just like, I don't know what it was, but the processes they were describing in the rules, I was just bored to death with, and I don't know what it was, and that's not a fair way to judge a game. But I was just looking at it, I'm like, I don't want to keep track of this. I don't want to keep track of who's next to who. I don't want to, get fiddly with this. Everything that I felt like it was fiddly with, I was like, oh, I just have no interest in trying to remember that or track it or whatever. So I feel like this game really strikes a good balance. It finds a nice spot where, as I've said before in some of these videos, you get a couple of experienced players. You could easily play this in a weekend, maybe even do it in a long day. And I feel like you would get a basic Stalingrad, experience, like a fun, general Stalingrad vibe. And, credit where credit's due. Like, this game is not some, this game's been around a while. And so, credit to John Hill, the designer, for sort of, but cracking, this one so long ago. Like, he really, I feel like, was onto something with this one. So, again, I apologize for not getting through all 7 turns. I would have been curious to see, like I said, there's a lot more Russians now than the Germans. Could the Russians have taken it back? The Germans, I think, are behind the curve because I didn't know what they were doing. They did some damage. They got some skin in the game, but I think they needed to have done more damage and be in a much stronger place now as they start to fade. And so I think, if I had to guess, I would say that the Germans are probably on their way to losing this one. Maybe it would have been tight because I don't know what I'm doing, and maybe I would have played the Russians as poorly coming back as I played the Germans on the way in. But it's hard to say. But I know this is not an easy game to get. That's part of the reason why I wanted to pull it out, because I was like, oh, I'll do something that not everybody is doing at the moment, because it might be interesting for somebody like who's always wondered what this game was like. Hopefully, this gave you a little bit of insight, and I hope the few people that watch these got something from them and enjoy them a little bit. And so I'll start taking this one down, and hopefully I'll have something lined up soon, and I'll get the next playlist started. All right. Thanks again.